So, Wacom Cintiq or iPad Pro, which one should you actually choose? Hi everyone, my name is Dorothea. I'm a digital artist working in animation industry as character and background designer. And today I'd like to talk about something that every artist thinks about at some point. What should you choose, an iPad Pro or a drawing screen tablet like Wacom Cintiq? So, let's get started. If you just started your art journey, you probably ask yourself this exact question. Should you invest in iPad and create your professional work there, or should you go for a full setup like laptop, like MacBook, and screen tablet like Wacom Cintiq? As you can probably guess, the answer depends entirely on your needs. But if you're a beginner, that's not very helpful because you don't know what your needs will be yet. So today I'd like to share with you my own experience for almost 8 years of drawing as digital artist, and I will tell you what I use most of the time and which problems each device solves for me. If we are talking about how it all started, when I first got into the digital art, it was in 2018 I think, and I really wanted to work in the game industry so much. At that time there really wasn't my choice of tablets, and if you had laptop you bought a pen tablet to go with, and I remember that my parents gifted me one for my birthday. It was like the flat without screen tablet. I remember it was Wacom Intus Medium. It was one of those screenless tablets, basically a flat surface connected to your computer, and you draw on your tablet while looking at your monitor. And I understand that back then it was completely normal and everyone in the industry used one. Today it probably sounds strange and weird and maybe prehistoric because drawing without looking at where your hand is, it's really uncomfortable. But back then it was normal, and honestly I have to say that it wasn't so easy to use. It wasn't so easy to get used to it. I have to say that transition from I know how to draw on paper to I know how to draw digitally is much bigger than most people expect, and that is okay, because when artists first switch to digital, many feel like they have forgotten how to draw entirely, and that happened to me as well, because everything looks different, everything works differently, and there is different workflow, different tools that you're using, but this is like any other skill, you just adapt. Today I work as character and background artist in animation, and I also take on freelance projects. When people ask me whether I prefer my Wacom or my iPad, I actually think about it differently. For me, the real question is, can this project be done in Procreate or do I need a Photoshop? Because that's usually what determines which device I use. I don't enjoy working in the iPad version of Photoshop. I have spent years using the full desktop version, and that's still where I feel most comfortable. Anytime I need to edit large files, organize complex projects, or deliver some big production files, I usually switch to Photoshop on my computer. When I worked in animation studios for full time, Photoshop and Illustrator were standard tools for us. We constantly shared files through cloud storage, edited existing assets, reused parts of previous designs, and worked within established pipelines. For that kind of work, a desktop setup is simply more practical, and that is why I eventually bought a large Wacom Cintiq. And honestly, it was a dream purchase. I always wanted a huge drawing display where I could really spread out and work on large illustration and production files. An unexpected bonus is that you effectively get two screens, your laptop and your tablet display. For artists, that's incredibly useful. And now let's talk about downsides of the Cintiq laptop setup. The biggest disadvantage is portability. And that is true, that is actual pain for a lot of artists because you are tied to your desk. Usually you have laptop, tablet, power cables, connection cables, some adapters, a whole ecosystem of equipment. So yeah, you can't easily pick it up and go work at a coffee shop, you can't casually draw on a couch, and it takes up a surprising amount of desk space. Sometimes even finding a place for your coffee mug becomes a challenge. So why I wanted an iPad? Eventually I realized that I wanted something completely different. I wanted the freedom to draw anywhere, on a couch, in bed, while traveling, at a cafe. That freedom felt luxurious. Artists spend most of their day sitting. After 8 hours at a desk, the last thing many of us want is to sit there even longer, drawing for fun or for portfolio. In 2021, I got my first iPad. I started using Procreate and immediately fell in love with it. Suddenly, my workspace transformed from a collection of cables and devices into this: just an iPad and Apple Pencil. That's it, and for a while I wanted to do everything on the iPad. But where the iPad started showing limitations. Today, most of my personal work happens in Procreate, also character designs, line art, portfolio pieces, and some illustrations. I try to do as much as possible there because it's incredibly comfortable. But I have to say, there are still situations where I switch back to Photoshop and my big screen. First is shape-based work. If a project requires precise geometric shapes, vector-like accuracy, or very clean graphic design elements, Photoshop and Illustrator are much easier for me. Creating perfect shapes in Procreate never feels, like right. And one more thing I don't like about Procreate is that not only transforming but moving objects repeatedly can really reduce image quality. Second, huge files and lots of layers. And this is a big one because Procreate has layer limitations based on canvas size. And most artists eventually run into this. In animation production, for example, every body part, every detail of a character often needs to be separated onto clearly labeled layers. Photoshop can easily handle hundreds of layers without forcing me to think about limits. That flexibility is incredibly important in professional workflows. 3. Illustrator projects. If a project needs to be created in vector format, Illustrator is still the obvious choice. I don't take many vector jobs anymore, but when I did, my desktop setup was essential. One more thing I have to say that I constantly reviewing my artwork on multiple screens because I have to check the color. Sometimes my work looks perfect on my computer but completely different on my iPad or iPhone because colors, brightness, contrast, and overall feel can be absolutely different on different devices, and I have seen this really multiple times. So before I finish my work, I usually check it on several devices and make final adjustments. Usually I add some highlights and adjust saturation. The biggest issue with my Wacom Cintiq is the display resolution. My Cintiq 22 only has a resolution of 1920 by 1080 pixels. I have to say that for such a large screen, that is okay, but not perfect. You get absolutely used to it, but every time I switch from my iPad to Cintiq, I notice the difference immediately. These days, there are so many tablets available with 2K and 4K displays, so if I were buying a new tablet now, I would definitely look for at least 2K resolution and possibly even 4K. So which one do I prefer? The truth is, I don't think that one replaces the other because for comfort, portability, and everyday drawing, I usually choose iPad, but for serious production work, for big projects, for my usual Photoshop workflow, it also happens, and for, big important professional files that I have to to check, I usually choose Cintiq laptop and especially desktop versions of Photoshop and Illustrator. And if I had to describe it simply, my laptop and my Cintiq is like my foundation, but iPad is my freedom. One gives me maximum comfort, and that is my iPad, and the Cintiq gives me maximum power. And after years of drawing, I realized that I really need both. But that is just really my experience. I'd love to hear from you, your opinion, your experience. Are you team iPad or team Cintiq or any other screen tablet? Let me know in the comments. And thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!